But look, what did it take for us to get to the point of an apology? We had to threaten a lawsuit, Jesse. And by the way, we're still entertaining it. We're talking to some of the best lawyers out there that are experts in this. And as you know, these things can be very complicated. There's a lot of facts and circumstances around it. But we're not going to let this go, because you should not be able to smear 5,000 high school and college kids and then just be able to walk away with.
Imagine tuning into your favorite daytime talk show, expecting lighthearted banter, only to witness a calculated smear campaign against thousands of innocent teenagers. And then that show gets hit with a staggering $100 million lawsuit. Do you think major networks should be held accountable for what their hosts say? Let us know in the comments below, because what happened on ABC's The View with Charlie Kirk just blew the lid off everything you thought you knew about trusted news. This wasn't some minor dust-up. This was an explosion so massive it didn't just rattle the show. It sent shockwaves through the entire media world. Charlie Kirk wasn't playing games anymore. He dropped a thunderous $100 million lawsuit, and suddenly the entire daytime TV empire began to shake with a fear they hadn't anticipated.
It is the show that people love to hate.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
They get so much hate watching and hate watching viral clips of them saying ridiculous things. I mean, it is a rabies infested hen house.
And for years, The View has been the epitome of love to hate television, a chaotic, often unhinged spectacle that thrives on generating viral clips of ridiculous statements. It operates like a rabies-infested henhouse, churning out controversial opinions for clicks and outrage. But this time, they stepped over a crucial line. The controversy ignited after Kirk's Turning Point USA hosted a massive youth summit. Picture this, over 5,000 high school and college students from across the country dedicating their summer, spending hard-earned money on flights and travel just to gather and hear from conservative speakers. These weren't criminals or extremists. They were vibrant teenagers full of energy and idealism, flying in just to be part of something political and powerful. Yet, instead of acknowledging the remarkable feat of organizing such an event, or even simply reporting on it, The View chose, to smear it. They tossed out wild, unsubstantiated claims, painting Kirk's summit as having sinister ties to dangerous groups. Imagine being 16 or 17 years old, an engaged citizen, eager to learn, and then hearing on national television that your trip made you look like a dangerous criminal. The potential damage to their reputations, to their college applications, to their very sense of self was immense. The outrage from Kirk and his organization was not merely justified, it was a desperate plea for basic human decency and truth. The View felt they needed to do this because if they told their audience the truth, that despite soaring gas and flight prices, 5,000 young people chose to spend a weekend traveling to hear conservative ideas, their audience might just think twice about the very ideology The View relentlessly promotes. That apparently was a risk they couldn't take.
The reason they felt they needed to do that, Jesse, is because if they told their audience the truth, that when gas is the most expensive it's been, flights are super expensive, that 5,000 kids decided to spend a weekend in summer traveling across the country to go hear from conservative speakers, maybe the audience of The View would think twice about all of their ideas. That's why they felt so compelled to try to smear our wonderful summit this last weekend.
Yeah, they have nothing else to talk about. Maybe you should get the lawyer that worked on that Covington Catholic school case. What was that, a $200 million settlement?
The culture shift between right and left authoritarianism, and now people don't recognize that if you just stop looking at it in terms of red and blue, look at the actions, whether it's war, suppression of free speech, pharmacological interventions that are mandatory, whatever it is, that used to all be associated with the authoritative right, the authoritarian right, and now those things are being embraced by the left. And I just think it's just an ideology thing, and I think we get confused and we think we're on the right side, and if it's our side that's saying this, for sure that's the right thing to do, and no one's critically thinking about this.
Joe Rogan is the gateway drug for young men that thought they were Democrats to become MAGA. Joe Rogan is the bridge, and on that bridge they'll see RFK.
Kirk's response was swift and unprecedented. He launched a staggering $100 million lawsuit, a sum virtually unheard of in the realm of daytime television defamation. This wasn't a tactical maneuver for headlines. It was a direct assault on what he saw as malicious slander. He wasn't just fighting for himself, but for every single one of those 5,000 students whose characters were unjustly attacked. The magnitude of this lawsuit echoed the impact of cases like the Covington Catholic school settlement, which saw a massive payout out after a similar media smear against young people. Kirk, a public figure, is no stranger to political attacks and false statements. He's built a thick skin, but when the target became innocent high schoolers and college kids, when accusations surfaced that could follow them for a lifetime, Kirk said, enough. He drew a line in the sand, making it clear that this time he wasn't going to let it slide.
CEO of Turning Point USA and the author of the new book, The College Scam. So, Charlie, do you accept The View's apology?
I mean, regardless of whether or not I accept it, the question is, do our students accept it? That's really what's at heart here. They went after our 5,000 students at our event there of high school and college kids. And look, I get attacked all the time. People say false things. I'm a public figure. But when you go after 16 and 17-year-olds that travel from across the country that then have to live for the rest of their life with a shadow over them because someone at ABC says that they might be linked to neo-Nazis.
Her disgusting, gross elitism and her complete out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world. Sunny Hostin goes on The View and decides now would be a great time to dump all over the so-called uneducated.
What we did not have is white women who voted about 52%, right, for Donald Trump. Uneducated white women, is my understanding. You have Latino men, actually, voting more for him. And you have, and black men was not the story. We're not the story here because they voted almost 80% for the vice president.
Right. Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid, and it doesn't mean that you don't have wisdom. You can go to college and get a bunch of irrelevant facts about how men can allegedly give birth or whatever they teach.
I have no hate for Joy Behar. If I saw her, I'd give her a hug. I'd probably say the same thing about me if I was her. You're worried about losing your job, and you're worried about podcasts taking over, and who's the source of news, and we said Donald Trump was Hitler, but half the country disagreed with us, and he won, and this is fucking great, and Joe Rogan believes in dragons!
What followed only highlighted the stark lack of integrity at The View. Their supposed apology didn't come from regret or genuine reflection. It was a cold, calculated act issued only after the ominous shadow of Kirk's $100 million legal threat loomed large. This wasn't remorse. It was plain old-fashioned fear of getting sued. When Kirk was asked directly if he accepted their apology, his response was a masterclass in shifting the narrative back to the true victims. "It's not about me," he stated powerfully. "The question is, do our students accept it?" That single, profound sentence completely reframed the story. This wasn't about Kirk's bruised ego. It was about justice for an entire generation of young people who had been unjustly smeared by a platform that claims to champion truth and accountability. The forced smiles and uncomfortable jokes that permeated The View's attempts to walk back. Their comments only made them look more guilty, their apologies sounding less like contrition and more like a desperate strategy session. The cracks were showing, and even loyal fans began to sense that something fundamental had changed, and not for the better. Then, the seismic force of independent media, Joe Rogan, stormed into the conversation, metaphorically kicking the studio. Dr. In and setting the entire establishment on fire. Rogan didn't sugarcoat his words. He didn't play nice. He ripped into The View with raw, unfiltered honesty, calling them out for the chaotic, opinionated, and utterly unaccountable show they had become. His influence, particularly among young men, is undeniable. Many refer to him as a gateway. Drug for those moving away from traditional liberal viewpoints, a bridge to figures like RFK Jr. and Elon Musk. He didn't just criticize the show, he shattered its carefully constructed facade with brutal accuracy. Rogan highlighted their bizarre, almost ritualistic behavior. They always bring on one conservative woman just to yell at her, he observed, and his words resonated because they were demonstrably true. From Meghan McCain to the blonde woman. One from Survivor and Jamie Lyso, anyone who dared to voice a dissenting conservative opinion was routinely shouted down, silenced, and mocked. But this time, it wasn't just about disrespecting a guest, it was about trampling the truth in the name of entertainment, and Rogan was absolutely not having it anymore.
But with that show, is that show has this very specific ideological bubble in which they operate in, you know, and they always bring on a token conservative woman and they yell over her and silence her, and you know they did that with Meghan McCain, and they did that with the what is that other blonde woman from Survivor? Do you remember her, Jamie? She was always yelling. I mean, it's just it's a bizarre show. I think the way you before you start, I think the way you described it is brilliant, and the way we should all look at it. Of course, you're going to see race.
Yes.
The idea of being colorblind is ridiculous. But
Right.
treat everybody. They're just human beings.
Yeah.
Everybody's just individuals. That's a very strange show, but it's fun to watch. It's just fun to watch them.
It's good entertainment,
Yeah.
undoubtedly.
Well, they're just, it's interesting because I think Sunny is very intelligent, but she's ideologically captured.
Right.
That's sort of. I think the other ones. There's a couple of the other ones. don't have to name any names. Who are just very dull-minded. But I think Sunny's not one of them. I think she's smart but captured.
Sure.
And
I think she came into it with an agenda.
of course, they do everything with an agenda.
Rogan's fury reached a boiling point when he addressed Sunny Hostin's specific reckless blunder. He replayed the moment on his show where Hostin, in a stunning display of journalistic negligence, twisted a casual chat from his podcast about ancient reptile sightings into a sensational false claim that Rogan believed in dragons. Rogan shook his head in absolute disbelief as he watched the clip. "You didn't even listen to what was said," he exclaimed, his voice incredulous. That, he argued, was the real issue. Hostin wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in creating a damaging, attention-grabbing narrative. And in doing so, she did more than damage her own credibility. She handed Charlie Kirk a massive advantage in court. A lawyer, a former prosecutor no less, throwing around wild, unsubstantiated claims on national television. That is a lawsuit waiting to explode. Rogan didn't stop there. He connected this current gaffe to Hostin's prior, equally offensive comments, such as her dismissal of Donald Trump voters as uneducated white women. He systematically exposed her disgusting, gross elitism and her profound, out-of-touch nature with respect to the rest of the world. "Just because you didn't go to college doesn't mean you're stupid," Rogan scoffed, highlighting the sheer arrogance of her position. He argued that Hostin, despite her intelligence, was ideologically captured, allowing her agenda to blind her to truth and fairness.
Not really their audience. Their audience is a group of people they bring in to watch television shows. I don't know if you've ever seen audiences before for TV shows, but a lot of them are paid. They're paid to be there. So, because they have to guarantee that there's going to be people there. So there's services that you hire. And when a show gets really, really popular, like Letterman or something like that, obviously it has its own fan base.
Right.
Those people will try to get tickets before anybody else does. And in that case, they probably don't need to use a service anymore. They just get actual fans. But arguably, like, the real fans of The View that are like, oh, these ladies are on point. Most of those people can't leave the house. Like, they're probably immobile.
Right.
But Rogan peeled back the curtain on something even more disturbing, a revelation that utterly dismantled The View's manufactured credibility, the illusion behind its studio audience. He explained that most of those clapping, cheering, gasping reactions aren't from genuine, spontaneous fans. They are quite simply hired seat fillers. They're paid to be there, Rogan stated bluntly. There are services you hire. He painted a picture of a show so desperate for perceived popularity that it needed to guarantee an audience, suggesting that the real fans of The View that are like, oh, these ladies are on point, most of those people can't leave the house anymore. Like, they're probably immobile. The laughter that followed Rogan's revelation wasn't just entertainment. It was a complete, scathing dismantling of the show's very foundation. The View wasn't just out of touch, they were actively manufacturing applause and creating a false sense of engagement while systematically silencing and smearing real voices. Rogan hammered this point again and again, not to humiliate Hostin, but to underscore just how far traditional media had fallen from its fundamental responsibility to the truth. Rogan's commentary expanded beyond the immediate controversy, addressing the growing divide between traditional media and independent voices. He pointed out what millions were already thinking. They don't control the narrative anymore. He explained how The View represents the old guard, networks with their filters, teleprompters, and gatekeepers, who once dictated public discourse. But the new wave, propelled by podcasts, grassroots voices, and platforms that reach people directly, is dismantling that monopoly. This lawsuit wasn't just about Charlie Kirk or Joe Rogan. It was about the collapse of a system that believed it could say whatever it wanted, smear anyone, and walk away without facing consequences. And now that system was being dragged into the courtroom, kicking and screaming, forced to answer for its recklessness. Rogan didn't just destroy their logic, he exposed the hypocrisy that fuels their entire show. They preach fairness, truth, and accountability, yet they showed none of it when they targeted thousands of innocent students. He reminded everyone that these kids weren't political pawns, they were teenagers who gave up their summer to attend a conference, and now they were being branded as criminals by people who claimed to protect the youth on television. It was outrageous, a blatant abuse of power, and it demanded that a line be drawn. Both Kirk and Rogan made one thing unequivocally clear. This case wasn't about silencing the media, it was about protecting the truth. Because when you lie about people on live television backed by a billion-dollar network, there must be consequences. This wasn't some slow drip scandal. This was a wildfire, threatening to engulf an entire industry. As the legal battle continues, one thing is certain: daytime TV will never be the same again. The View is no longer just a talk show, it has become the face of a media war they never saw coming. If Kirk wins, this case could set an earth-shattering precedent, a legal reminder that defamation is not free speech, and smearing people on air has a monumental cost. Media outlets everywhere are watching with clenched jaws because if The View loses, it could be the start of a new era where every word uttered on live TV is one step away from a courtroom subpoena. For the first time in a long time, the old media was scared, not of a politician, not of ratings drops, but of a generation rising up and saying, enough. They weren't going to take the lies and labels anymore. That's why Rogan's takedown mattered so much. It wasn't just funny, it was incredibly powerful. It reached people who had tuned out of the noise and brought them back with a reason to care again. He didn't just call out Sunny Hostin, he turned her into a cautionary tale, a once respected, legal voice now tangled in a scandal of her own making, all because she forgot that microphones amplify more than sound. Or they amplify responsibility. The View's brand of smug superiority, their scripted chaos, their echo chamber applause, it all started to crumble because the truth, despite their best efforts, has an undeniable way of getting through. Even those who once staunchly defended the show began asking real questions. Why were they so quick to judge? Why did they target teenagers? Why did they mock instead of ask? And why were they only sorry when the lawyers got involved? Rogan didn't need a lavish studio, a teleprompter, or a PR team. All he needed was a microphone and the guts to tell the truth. And with every word, he stripped away the illusion The View had meticulously built for years. In the end, it wasn't just about Rogan, Kirk, or Hostin. It was about a system getting caught in its own tangled web. A system that thought it could say anything, smear anyone, and simply move on like nothing happened. But not this time. This time, the target fought back. This time, the truth had a voice louder than any studio laughter. And this time, a $100 million lawsuit wasn't just a number, it was a battle cry for accountability. Joe Rogan didn't just destroy their narrative, he burned it to the ground and handed the ashes back with a smirk. Because when truth meets arrogance, the truth wins. And this time, it won loudly.